How's it going, guys? Today's history lesson is going to be about the most iconic tank ever built, and my favorite tank of all time, the Soviet T-34. It is legendary in its own right up there with the German Tiger and the American M1A1 Abrams. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the tank and take a look at some gameplay footage. This first battle is, I think, one of my first games in the T-34, and I was so overly impressed with its performance and its durability and its just overall ability to one-shot enemy tanks, as you're about to see on this poor, what was that guy? T-70? Yeah, this tank is an absolute blast to play. So the T-34 was a Soviet medium tank which had a absolutely profound and permanent effect on the fields of tank tactics and design. It was first developed in 1940. It's been described as the most effective, efficient, and influential tank design of World War II. At its introduction, the T-34 possessed the best balance of firepower, mobility, protection, and ruggedness of any tank. Its 7.62mm high-velocity gun was the best tank gun in the world at that time. Its heavy sloped armor was impenetrable by standard anti-tank weapons, and furthermore it was very agile. Though its armor and armament were surpassed later in the war, when they first entered battle in 1941, German generals called it the deadliest tank in the world. The T-34 was the mainstay of Soviet armored forces throughout World War II. The design and construction of the tank were continuously refined during the war to enhance effectiveness and decrease costs. A moment of silence for the ZIS, as he just gets completely destroyed in the final moments of that game. This next battle here was really fun. I wanted to see how well this tank would perform in close quarter battle, and you're about to see there that excellent maneuverability of that tank, avoiding that obstacle there. T-34 was the most produced tank of the war, and the second most produced tank of all time, after its successor, the T-54-55 series. By the end of the war in 1945, the T-34 had replaced many light and heavy tanks in the Red Army service. It accounted for the majority of Soviet tank production, and following the war, it was widely exported. The origins of the T-34 begin in 1939. The most numerous Soviet tank models of the time were the T26 Infantry Tank and the BT series of fast tanks. The T-26 was a slow-moving tank designed to keep pace with infantry on the ground. The BT tanks were cavalry tanks, fast-moving and light, designed for maneuver warfare. Both were Soviet developments of foreign designs from the early 1930s. The T-26 was based on the British Vickers 6-ton, and the BT tanks were based on a design from the American engineer Walter Christie. Both were lightly armored, like their counterparts, proof against small arms fire, but not anti-tank rifles. Both were armed with a 45mm gun, which was a significant improvement over the tanks they were designed off of. And here you're about to see a T-28 just get completely worked over by my T-34. As I'm switching targets, doing damage to both of them at the same time. This T-28 moves in front, but still the ZIS I took out his gunner before the T-28 could save his buddy. And here, I think I have damage to my turret ring or something. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. But nevertheless, during the battle of Lake Khasan in July 1938 and the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in 1939, which was an undeclared border war against Japan, the Soviets deployed nearly 500 T-26, BT-5, and BT-7 tanks against the Imperial Japanese Army, the IJA. Although the IJA Type 95 Ha-Go light tanks had diesel engines, the T-26 and BT tanks did not. Their gasoline engines, commonly used in tank designs by most nations at the time, often burst into flames. when hit with the IJA tank killer teams using Molotov cocktails. Poor quality welds in the Soviet armor plates left small gaps between the plates, and flaming petrol from the Molotov cocktails easily seeped into the fighting and engine compartments. Portions of the armor plating that had been assembled with rivets also proved to be vulnerable. The Soviet tanks were also easily destroyed by the Japanese Type 95 37mm gun, despite the low velocity of the round. The use of riveted armor led to the problem of spalling, where the impact of enemy shells, even if they failed to disable the tank or kill the crew, would cause the rivets to break off and become projectiles inside the tank, which makes for a very, very bad day. After the battles with the Japanese army, a tank designer by the name of Mikhail Koshkin, who had been working on a new prototype designated the A20, convinced Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to let him develop a second prototype, a more heavily armed and armored universal tank, which reflected these lessons learned in those battles. It could replace both the T26 and the BT tanks. Koshkin named the second prototype the A32, after its 32mm frontal armor. It had a 7.62mm gun, the same model engine that his A20 prototype had. Both prototypes were tested in the field trials at Kubinka in 1939, with the heavier A32 proving to be as mobile as the A20. A still heavier version of the A32 with 45mm frontal armor, wider tracks, and a newer L11 7.62mm gun was approved for production as the T-34. Koshkin chose the name after the year 1934, when he began to formulate his ideas about the new tank. And to commemorate, what am I reading here? Sorry about that. Anyways, valuable lessons from Lake Khasan and Khalkhin Gul regarding armor protection, mobility, quality welding, and main guns were incorporated into the new T-34 tank, which represented a substantial improvement over the BT and T26 tanks in all four areas. Koshkin's team completed two prototype T-34s in January of 1940. In April and May, they underwent a grueling 2,000-kilometer drive from Kharkiv to Moscow for a demonstration for the Kremlin leaders. Then they drove to the Mannerheim line in Finland, then back to Kharkiv. Some drivetrain shortcomings were identified and corrected. Political pressure came from conservative elements in the army to redirect resources into building older T-26 and BT tanks, or to just flat out cancel the T-34 production until a more advanced T-34M was designed. This pressure was brought to bear by the developer of the KV and IS-2 tanks, which were in competition with the T-34. I always find it so funny how greed and money will get in the way of progress. And here you can see the T-34 just completely going to town on these poor sons of bitches up here trying to cap. I'm up against Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, Panzer IIs, everything that the T-34 would have gone up against at the time, and I'm just punching holes in these guys, firing just the standard armor-penetrating ammo that the T-34 comes with. Later on, I think I switched to the fragmentation rounds, armor penetration high explosive, which is where did you come from? Goodbye. Resistance from the military command and concerns about high production costs were finally overcome by anxieties about the poor performance that the Soviet tanks by the poor performance of Soviet tanks during the Winter War in Finland, and the effectiveness of German tanks during the Battle of France. Because keep in mind, Russia was not invaded yet by this point, I believe. The first production T-34s were completed in September 1940, completely replacing the production of the T-26 and the BT series, and the multi-turreted T-28 as well. Koshkin died of pneumonia, which was exacerbated by the drive from Kharkiv to Moscow at the end of that month, and the T-34's drivetrain developer, Alexander Morozov, was appointed chief designer. Then came Germany's surprise invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, more commonly known as Operation Barbarossa. And this poor German tank, or no, it's a BT-7 down here, just trying so hard to do some damage to me. No. Goodbye, my friend. Operation Barbarossa was launched by the Wehrmacht. Rapid advances forced the evacuation of Soviet tank factories to the Ural Mountains, an undertaking of immense scale and haste that presented enormous logistic difficulties and was extremely punishing to the workers involved. Alexander Morozov personally supervised the evacuation of all skilled engineers and laborers, machinery, and stock from KHPZ factory to re-established factory at the site, which was later to be renamed the Stalin Ural Tank Factory N183. While these factories were being rapidly relocated, the industrial complex surrounding Stalin Ural Tank Factory N183 in Stalingrad continued to work double shifts throughout the period of withdrawal, from September 1941 through September 1942. To make up for the production lost, and they produced about 40% of all T-34s during that period. As the factory became surrounded by heavy fighting during the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942, the situation there grew absolutely desperate. Manufacturing innovations were necessitated by material shortages, and stories still persist of unpainted T-34 tanks driven straight out of the factory directly onto the battlefield. Stalingrad kept up production until September 1942. Soviet designers were well aware of certain design deficiencies in the tank, but most of the desired remedies would have slowed tank production, and so they were just not implemented. The only changes allowed on the production lines through to 1944 were to make production simpler or cheaper. And I believe this Stug is, oh, that's right, the token black man in his Panzer IV, scoring a nice side shot there right into my fuel tanks. So, hats off to you, token black man. They were well aware of the deficiencies in the tank. New methods were developed for automated welding and hardening of the armor plate, including innovations by Professor N.V. Patton. The design of the 7.62mm F-34 gun, model 1941, was reduced from an initial 861 parts to only 614. A somewhat less cramped hexagonal turret was introduced in 1942 because it used flat armor plates rather than curved ones. It was actually faster to produce. Limited rubber supplies led to the adoption of steel-rimmed road wheels, and a new clutch was adapted to an improved 5-speed transmission and engine, improving reliability. Over 2 years, the unit production cost of the T-34 was reduced from 269,500 rubles in 1941 to 193,000, and then down to 135,000 rubles. Production time was cut in half by the end of 1942, even though most of the experienced factory workers has been sent to the battlefield and were replaced by a mixed workforce that consisted of 50% women, 15% boys, and 15% invalids and old men. In 1943, T-34 production had reached an average of 1,300 tanks per month. This was the equivalent to 3 full-strength Panzer divisions. By the end of 1945, over 57,300 T-34s had been built. 34,000 T-34 tanks of multiple variants with 76mm guns, and another 22,000 of the revised T-34-85 model in 1944 through 1945. Altogether, as many as 84,000 T-34s were thought to have been built, plus 13,000 self-propelled guns built on the T-34 chassis. It was the most produced tank of the Second World War, and the second most produced tank of all time after its successor, the T-54, T-55. So, can you hear me shuffling my paper there? That was my essay that I wrote on the T-34 for this video. So, here I'm getting an artillery barrage called down on me, and this Panzer III better hurry up and move out of my way, because I'm not trying to stick around and wait for the shells to start falling on me. I got Germans to kill. The T-34 is, by no stretch of the imagination, not a perfect tank, but it is easily ranks up there with some of the greatest tanks ever created. You can go out on a limb and say that it pretty much is the weapon that won the war for Russia. If Russians wouldn't have implemented a tank like this, I believe that Russia would have fallen a lot sooner. You know, the Germans would have just pretty much steamrolled straight over all the earlier model Russian tanks developed. You know, they were going up against Panzer III, Panzer IVs, Tigers. This little tank wouldn't have come along. The outcome of World War II would have been much, much, much different. So here I am chasing down some AI. This battle has gone completely in our favor now, and now it's just pretty much a turkey shoot. You got all these AI German tanks coming over the ridge here, Panzer IIs, 3s, 4s, and I'm just mowing them down one after the other. This is absolutely incredible. Driving straight into a tree though. My driver's unconscious now, but firing those armor penetrating high explosive shells that does all that fragmentation inside the tank. You can see this just carving through. That was a Panzer IV-C, I believe. Just carving through all these guys like it's absolutely nothing. This tank up here is about the... No, I hit its cannon barrel. Realigning. Can't quite see where the tank's positioned at. The reload time, though, not exactly the fastest on Earth. And there, kill number 8. That was a Panzer II. And that's pretty much it. You can see all the smoking ruins of German tanks all around me. I pretty much, with the help of, you know, all my allies down here on this side of the map, just carved a path of destruction through the German forces. I felt so bad for this enemy team. They really had no idea what the hell hit them. Yeah, I just can't get over how much fun it is to play this tank. I believe that's it. This battle's going to be over here. Yeah, there we go, waiting for results. Let's take a look at the post-game stats here and see the damage inflicted. So yeah, we have 8 kills and assists, 3 crits, 18 hits. We got the anti-mech ward. Fun times. God only knows how much stuff we unlocked here. Shadow Strike. How many of those players? So only 2 of them were actual enemy players, and then the other 6 were all AI. Not bad, if I do say so myself. Not bad at all. And here we are. As you can see, all this destruction I'm causing with my T-34, I don't even have everything unlocked in the damn thing yet. I'm only halfway through researching it, and this thing's an absolute juggernaut on the battlefield. You saw throughout all the different replays how many shots were ricocheting off, how many shots were penetrating, doing damage. My crew was surviving. This tank is an absolute blast, and I recommend you all check it out whenever you take to the battlefield in War Thunder. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys for taking time to watch my video. Give it a like if you liked my little history lesson, and comment down below if you have any comments for me or questions. I'm sure I messed up a lot of the facts there. It's not like I was reading from Wikipedia or anything, but yeah, thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.